If Naoya Inoue goes on to defeat Marlon Tapales later this year, becomes undisputed in a second weight class, equaling, of course, what Terence Crawford did this year as well, then the conversation towards just who deserves Fighter of the Year 2023 is going to become a little bit more difficult. Though I do suspect many will be picking Crawford on the strength of that single victory over Errol Spence. Now, the most basic criticism against this position is found in those who say, look, you can't only fight once in a calendar year and get the award. It's just not enough work. Even if it was a good victory, you didn't subject yourself to enough risk for us to give you the green light there. Now, if we look at 1972 Ring Magazine Awards, Fighter of the Year is shared between middleweight kingpin Carlos Monzon and Muhammad Ali. Now, this was a year in which Ali didn't fight any of his key rivals, but he fought 6 times. 6 times against decent opposition packs quite a punch. If, however, we make a bit of an exception on this occasion and say, look, that win is so good, it basically eclipses what anyone else did, well, then we're faced with that other slight problem. We have to start to go into slightly uncomfortable territory and ask ourselves, just how good was the win? Now, we can't take anything away from Terence Crawford, who was magnificent, completely dominant, and that performance, I think, spoke the truth that no matter when those guys fought, Crawford was always going to beat him. But in boxing, there is a difference between where you think the truth lies and how much credit you actually deserve. Just think of it like a set value. Once we've agreed what it is, or in the right kind of ballpark, you are going to accrue, through fair judgment, a certain amount of interest. There is no ifs or buts about it. And a rivalry which I think really underlines the distinction I'm talking about is the one between Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. Now, of course, Floyd beat Manny in 2015, and the truth of it for me was, had they fought earlier, whatever extra ferocity and speed the Pac-Man had, it would have been offset by the extra reflexes that the Money Man had. That's where the truth of it lies for me. Mayweather was always better. But credit can only be given where results are attained. And the fact is, even though Floyd was older himself, he still only beat an older, slightly diminished Manny Pacquiao. Now, of course, Errol Spence was undefeated at the time. He certainly hadn't been blasted out like Manny Pacquiao had against Marquez at late 2012. No, but if we just forget the car crash, and we even pardon the fact he hadn't fought in over a year before the big fight, which is becoming increasingly common before people go into big fights, which is stupid. But we just kind of knew on an instinctual level that this fight is not happening at the ideal time. We were going into the fight questioning, who's already a little bit past their prime there. One of them probably is. That kind of tells you all you need to know. This modern phenomenon, you could say kind of Floyd-inspired, of marinating fights where key rivals just circle each other year after year after year to the point that we're getting bored, that we're doubting it'll ever happen, and then them suddenly agreeing that, the time was right. That just smacks a little bit of cashing out. And so, trying to put it fairly, without wanting to poop on what was such a tremendous performance, it seems public opinion is leaning more towards Spence being a little bit stale. Yes, of course, now when we factor in the car crash, the inactivity, there's good reasons to believe so. Whether it would have made a difference or not, that's not the point. We have to give Spence a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. His career isn't complete. He may go on to win more world titles. But as things stand, it's not looking great. He's probably in the last quarter of his career. He took a bad beating. And if he doesn't really show form again, then Crawford's win isn't going to age so good. It's kind of the reason why that if I have to choose between the two, I put more stock in a fighter defeating somebody on the way up, maybe a little bit green, but really hungry for that first world title, than I do the guy who's had a long career and is still world level but starting to just crack a little bit. There's more reason to be critical with the latter because fighters age, of course. They lose their physical edge, which is so essential in the ring. And so looking at the likes of Ricky Hatton's victory over Costa Tszyu back in 2005, while it was more of a big moment than Vince Phillips defeating Tszyu back in 97, was it a better win? Did Hatton defeat a more potent force? I'm leaning towards no. I don't want people to get the wrong impression though. The internet has this terrible habit of dividing us into you're either with me or you're against me. Crawford is a pleasure to watch. He is tremendously skillful. How can you not like him? He goes about his business. He doesn't really trash talk. He's just a pure fighter with a killer instinct. I think he's been a little bit unfortunate with his opposition. And if it is indeed true that Spence was ducking him, it's unfortunate that that's not going to allow him to reap quite the same levels of interest on that signature victory. But it's also what makes boxing so compelling and unique, because it's not just to do with how many Grand Slams you've won, or how many cups you've lifted, how many times you were picked as MVP, or whether or not you're undefeated. No, it's to do with a combination of factors coming together, which we then carefully analyse, contrast it against centuries of history, and say, is this worthy of being labelled great? And if the answer is a big yes regarding Crawford Spence, I want to hear about it. What do you make of my criticisms? Do you think Crawford is worth being Fighter of the Year 2023? And are there any examples of a guy who fought just once in the calendar year who got the award?